Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the Lost Dogs and Mixed Blessings podcast. We are all sitting here today. We've been sharing an internship for the summer. Beside me is Aaron Ellis. There's Jerry Hernandez and Adalia Buchan. And we're all here today. We're going to talk about the internship we've had, the summer that we've had, the challenges we've faced, the good things, the bad things, the books we've read, the studies we've had, what the Lord has shown us, and what comes next for us. So I thought we'd just open this up, and let's start with the books that we read. Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster was our first one that we went through as a group. So what was good, what was bad, what was hard, what was challenging? Let's talk about that.
1, 2, 3, not it.
I thought it
I would
was.
have to. Oh,
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I'd have to say the good part, which I think was the best, was the silence and solitude. I like that a lot, especially like when we did it at Ozark, like to just be still, because sometimes we forget, like in the waves of the world and so everything surrounding us, like makes us forget to just stay still and like trust God and everything, and like to just be silent, try to like hear His voice and seek Him more. And I really thought that was the good part. I'd say the hardest part was probably the confession part. I don't know.
Do you want
Like
to
to me,
unpack
I
that
don't
here
like.
now for us? Or?
You got
Yeah.
something you got your chest there, bud?
I don't know. Like it's just weird sometimes for me to just like go tell people like what I'm going through and like the problems I'm facing or like things like that. Like I don't know. I think that's most challenging for me personally. So I would say that's one of the hardest parts. And then yeah.
Really, that's a really interesting point. Like, why is it hard for Christians to tell each other that something's gone sideways and we need prayer or help? Because I think some people are really good at asking for help, and some are
Mhm.
terrible. Like, why is that? Why should confession be such a challenging thing?
I think it's
I think
because like oh I think it's
no.
like
Go ahead.
the like you're scared someone might look at you different and like just that aspect of it and like I don't know some people are like scared of like truth and being called out. I mean I'm kind of not like that but kind of in ways so like half and half. So I think it's just like that aspect of it.
I think a point that we can trust in this group and other places, but it seems like there is a false pretense that we sometimes put on ourselves or that we think others put on us about, oh, we're Christians or oh, we're working in ministry or whatever, and we're supposed to be this certain idea of a person. And whenever we stop and admit, hey, I'm not everything I'm supposed to be always. It's a difficult thing because it's like, how now are we going to come across? And a lot of times that misperception is self-imposed. It's not even there to begin with. People don't look at us that way, and if they do, then that's kind of sounds like an issue that they've got. But I think that we as Christians, especially if you work with a church or a part of a church in any sort of leadership capacity, we impose that on ourselves a lot, and so therefore we kind of withdraw from our own struggles rather than just facing up to the reality of, hey, we are also faultful sinners. And rather than confronting that face to face and opening up, I mean, I'm not saying we all need to go air our dirty laundry in front of everybody, but but we need to address it within ourselves, and we need to have that core group of people that we can open up with and talk to about these kinds of things. Because you're right, that confession thing is difficult. Nobody wants to sit around and be like, oh yeah, I really screwed up big this time, you know. But there's times when we need to, and I think a lot of it is our own misconception that people look at us in a certain way, and we look at others in a certain way. We hear something, oh, did you hear what so and so did the other day?
Mhm.
We do it too, you know. And I think that's something that we as individuals and we as a body of Christ need to address and need to get past.
I think
Yeah.
it's really interesting too, because it's kind of this idea that like it would be different if everyone was practicing the disciplines all the time. But like even reading this book, I think it's interesting because it kind of starts by getting the first chapter is calls the spiritual disciplines the door to liberation. And so it kind of gets to the heart of the fact that when we say spiritual disciplines, we're not talking about discipline as in like a punishment for doing something wrong. We're talking about like a self-discipline, about a behavior, about a concept that we engage with, and that we engage in that behavior with the goal of being closer to Jesus, becoming more like Jesus, having a closer relationship with the Lord, and that's really the heart of the issue in this book. Is it's like, what are the things that we're called to do in the Bible in order to have that walk with the Lord? Um, and so I think that's really interesting. And it's like, if we were all practicing all of these disciplines, how would the church look different? Like, would there be more grace, more time spent in prayer together? Like, just what would that look like? And how can we get closer to that? And that's interesting too, because it kind of breaks the disciplines apart into sections. So there's the inward disciplines, the outward disciplines, and the corporate disciplines. And so it goes from a place of starting inwards and moving outwards. So it's something where it's like, if we start practicing these inwardly, then it will naturally display itself outwardly. And how will that cause change in our churches and in our communities and our friendships?
Yeah, I think that concept from the inside out is a really, really fundamental one. Like absolutely fundamental. And I remember, being in Israel, and you walk around the Galilee, and I remember this one guy talking about how, like during times of Passover, what would happen is before they would go over and they would whitewash all the tombs, so that you wouldn't just kind of stumble into one and then become ceremonially unclean by accident, and then miss all of the festivities and such. And so they would paint all this stuff. Now, on a really sunny day, it would look beautiful, right? You can imagine that, just the reflection of the water, all this kind of stuff. But there's dead stuff inside. And I think that idea of like, we fancy ourselves up, we put ourselves up, we put on the airs, we wear the clothes or whatever. But inside, if we're dead there, then what good is that? And I think Foster's book really teaches us to go inward, to go deep, so that the outward disciplines can shine. Because he starts with the inward disciplines and moves to the outward disciplines, like worship, things like that, right? Like we can fake worship, but you can't fake it if it's from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
Very important concept.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because I think in every single chapter, it's like every discipline is more than what you would think it is at first, just by reading the title. And so I'll use worship as an example, because I do music on Sunday and I am a worship leader, where it's like, we say that, we engage in worship on Sunday, let's worship together, but that worship is more than just music. Like our praise music on a Sunday morning is a form of worship, but our worship is like, how do you live every day to bring God glory? And so that's one of them, where he goes into that in that chapter about how worship is more than just this one narrow idea or concept. And he does the same thing with confession. It's more than this, this one narrow thing. It can look like a couple of different things. And so it's like, I've found it in every chapter where it's like, it's more than what you would think at first glance.
This chapter on meditation. But before I get into that, I want to touch real quick on what Jerry mentioned about the idea of solitude. And I just got to say once again that this guy does not know how to camp, because he said don't go camping to meditate or to whatever. And I just feel bad for the guy. I want to take him camping, because he just clearly is doing it wrong.
He's doing it wrong.
But, anyways, moving on past that, but the idea that he talked about on meditation was he posed this idea, because we think of meditation and we associate it with the Buddhist idea of nirvana and emptying yourself. But he said when you look at it, and so people are like, oh, don't meditate, that's the devil's stuff. No, it's not. But he looked at it as like as a Christian meditation of not emptying yourself, but of trying to be filled with something else, something better. And even Paul mentions this. He says, whatever things are good and lovely and pure, think on these things. David said, I will meditate on your word day and night. And so rather than trying to empty yourself, which is partially involved of getting rid of the distractions of the world, which is why camping is a great thing to do, is to get rid of that, but then to fill it, not just leave an empty space, but to fill it with something better, something pure, something lovely, something right. People don't see things a lot. And that really resonated with me because we don't think of it that way very often. As we think, oh, I'm going to go meditate on this. What do you mean meditate? Am I Yoda just sitting there on top of a rock, just whatever, trying to raise an X-wing out of the swamp or something? No, I'm actually thinking about like David said. I'll meditate on your word day and night, and let the words sink into you and fill you, as opposed to trying to empty yourself. Let yourself be filled with something else. And I think that's an idea that a lot of people, especially within the church, don't realize and understand that concept of meditation. I thought he did a really good job of setting that juxtaposition between like the Eastern idea of meditation and more of a Christian idea of meditation, and how it can be very beneficial in a Christian's life.
Yeah, that's a good one. What are some of the other concepts that were in the book that grabbed you?
I
I'd
think
say the fasting one. Oh, we keep doing this.
That's right. It's like a roulette conversation, right?
Yeah, I know. It's like dinner at my house.
There you go.
I'd say the fasting one. I think to me that was probably the easiest one because I've kind of done it since I think high school, like senior year. So like I kind of was disciplined in that area whenever I first came to Christ. I started to do it. So like it just kind of like makes you humble yourself and realize your wants and needs, like what your flesh truly desires, and to just like silence that and focus all your attention onto God. So I think that's a really important thing because sometimes, like I keep saying, the waves of life just take you and drift you away, and it's good to just kind of do that, to discipline yourself, to just try to go towards Him, like lean more on Him and just be still.
Yeah, awesome. And fasting is difficult because it's asking people to give something up that is perceived as a desperate need. And
Mhm.
and I think there's a well, I gotta be careful I say this, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And what I mean by saying that is that I think the right way is when you enter into it, replacing food with prayer and study. I think that's the right way to do it. So you're sacrificing, you're giving something up in order to take time to pray. If you're just fasting because you're thinking, okay, it's just a religious exercise, I think you're missing. You know, you can fast for health, and that makes more sense to me because it's like, yeah, go through intermittent fasting if you want, that's fine. But if it's not spiritual, then you're only going to get certain physical benefits from it. But
Mhm.
fasting, when it comes from the Bible, it's like, yeah, there's a time of testing. There's a time that's difficult. You get to a place where, the first 24 hours are usually a little more difficult. By the time you get to day 3, you're kind of in the zone, right?
Mhm.
And then you can, get into it a bit more. But I think like if you're able to fast and that discipline of fasting, of just giving up something, not in a Lent style, but I mean, if you're giving something up on a regular basis and replacing it with the Word of God and prayer and meditation, then I think something beautiful can come from that for sure. Uh, but yeah, so I think there is a right way and a wrong way. And the wrong way, I think, would be to walk into church like, I'm fasting, everybody. I'm
Yeah.
holier than everybody. You really should do this too. Skip the
Yeah.
potluck, right? Like,
No, you stand in the corner of the potluck so everybody can see you.
that's right. Exactly. Yes, I sit at the potluck and not eat. And just like, I'm fasting. Yeah, that's probably the
Yeah.
wrong way to do it.
But that does tie in with what he was saying about this idea of meditation. You empty yourself of one thing in order to be filled with something
Mhm.
else. And leading into when he wrote about the discipline of community. And I remember, I forget which convent or nunnery or whatever you call it was, but the nuns would go off and they would spend time in solitude, fasting, meditating, and praying. But then at the end of that, they were part of the deal was they came back and they shared their experiences with all the other nuns or whatever. And I think that that's a big thing that we sometimes realize is yes, it is important to spend time alone. It is important for you and to focus on your personal relationship with God, but it is also important for us to realize that we are a part of a bigger thing. We are a body with all different points and purposes, and it is our responsibility to share with others. It's like, hey, God showed me these things, and this is a new thing that I hadn't thought of before.
Mhm.
And I've taught on this extensively in the past that Christianity is not a solo sport. It is designed to be played as a team. And yes, there are individual aspects to it. Some people are better at shooting the ball than others, but we're all a part of that team, and that is a responsibility. And that's one of the disciplines he wrote about, was the discipline of community and being a part of that group and finding the role in that group through solitude, through fasting, through all of these things. But then you got to plug it in somewhere. You can't just go do it. You got to plug it in.
So let me ask this question then. Who would you give this book to? You don't need to name a name, but I mean, like, what kind of person would you give this book to?
I think it would be best suited for somebody who, not necessarily a new Christian, but somebody who wants to go further in their faith, and maybe step into like the 5-foot into the pool as opposed to the 2-foot into the pool, but they're not quite ready to go off the high dive yet. I think it's somewhere in that ground, like just your everyday churchgoer. They've been going for a long time. They know the basics, the basic tenets of things. But this just is a little push to be like, let's see if we can go a little bit further now, a little bit deeper, and take one simple concept and just start really unpacking it and seeing what kind of other treasures are in there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I think it's kind of geared towards, and I think that's who it would be best suited for.
So someone to go deeper.
Yeah,
right.
But they're already established. It's not like, what is this whole God thing?
Right.
But I think somebody who's kind of there, but they want to just start developing their faith, their walk with God a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think there's an example. I think would be one in worship, and he's talking about posture. So if somebody is, they go to church and they just recognize, look, I want to get more out of worship. I see other people engaging in a meaningful way, and I just don't feel it, kind of thing. That it's like that whole idea of like opening your hands, right? That's a posture of receiving. And sometimes even just the very nature of doing, we can have it in our heart, that's obviously more important, but the very nature of opening your hands to receive is very, very important when it comes to worship. And so, like I think that's right. It's a great book to take someone from where they are to kind of the next chapter of their walk with the Lord. It may challenge people in different ways. Maybe somebody has never fasted before. Somebody is, not going to church at the moment. Therefore, the community would be challenged to them. That kind of thing. So, yeah, that's a good point. What do you guys think? What's another person you'd give this book to?
I think I think this is a good, like, somebody would have to be interested in this kind of thing to read it. If you gave it to somebody that, is completely happy with where they were at, it might not sink in. But if you have the person that's like, they're going to church, they've been a Christian, you might even they might even be perceived as a mature Christian. But, for the person that wants it to be more than tradition, I think that's another good thing about this book is he talks about, like, we do these things traditionally. This is what's perceived as normal or treated as normal, but there's more to it, So for the person who wants to go deeper and for the person who knows, like, we have these traditions, we have this liturgy, we have a way that we do things, but why? And how can we do, I want it to be more than this.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I couldn't really put it to words, but I really liked what Aaron said about like the deep end and then the dive board. Like that was a good explanation to me. I really like that, and that's what I was trying to like put in my head together.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Okay, well, um, moving on to like the next book, and we might as well get the books out of the way, first. But like, so we're currently going through "Surrounded by Idiots" by Thomas Erickson, and the book's name can be a bit of a trip if you're not careful. But it's not that you, the reader, or us as an internship group are surrounded by idiots. It's not that at all. It's essentially different personality types, how to recognize your own and how to get along and how to work with and communicate with different people. It's not a Christian book, but I think it's one of those books. It's actually pretty important for ministry. So, what's something that you've gleaned from reading this book so far? Other,
fine.
other than feeling
Trying to
called
put
out.
it into words.
Well, I
I
think
think
anybody who's
I
ever
think one of the sorry.
oh yeah, I don't know. Are we on a delay or something? Anybody who's ever written a paper for school or given a class presentation, you understand that there's the presenter and then there's the audience. And I think that that's kind of what this book really helps with is understanding that there are different ways of communicating. And there's different levels of education. Like if you're writing a paper for a grade class, you use that type of a language. Whereas if you're writing a dissertation, you use that type of a language. And it's the same thing. But what this book really, I think, helps with is understanding who your audience is. Because once we're all grown-ups and adults and supposedly responsible and making good decisions, um, we all kind of stop thinking about that. We just think we're all on the same level, but we're not. And it's not even not a level of intelligence, but a level of our manner of sending and receiving information. We all perceive things differently. And what I say, and I may mean exactly what I say, but what you heard could mean something entirely different to you. And I think that this book does a really good job of helping understand the different personality traits. And when you are consciously aware of that, of what type of person you're talking to, not just grade level or intelligence level, but the type of personality you're talking to, then you can help adapt to meet them where they are and find that common ground between yourself, because you have to put yourself in a category too, which is sometimes not fun. But you understand the way you communicate, then you have to understand how you want them to receive what you're trying to say. And this book does a really good job of helping to understand the different personality types and navigating those waves and stuff of trying to communicate, which is why it is good for anybody involved in any type of a group setting, whether business or in ministry or anything. If you're going on a camping trip, which everybody should do. Yeah, I'm not going to let that go.
Next summer, I'm doing an internship camping trip.
Yeah. Not during the heat wave.
Oh, we're not going to do it anywhere in Oklahoma. Don't worry about that.
I think it's.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I think it's really interesting because I think what a lot of different like personality tests and personality matrices, I guess is the word. Anyways, sure. Concepts, different things where people are, finding out what their personality type is. They go very deep into like, how do you understand yourself? How do you understand yourself? How do you understand your thoughts and your behaviors and your patterns? And I think where they fall short is, well, we're not all the same. So lots of things will talk about understanding yourself, but they don't necessarily talk about how do you understand the people around you and how you interact with them. And so what I'm liking about this book is it helps you understand yourself, but it also helps you understand the people around you and like, oh, that's why I have trouble communicating with this person, or that's why this person and I probably shouldn't be doing a group project together because there will be hurt feelings and nobody's going to be having a good time. Or, when I say something to this person, I got to make sure I, try to say it this way so that they receive it, because what I say and what I intend and what someone else hears can be, like Aaron said, two different things. And for me personally, we started reading the book and I was kind of thinking, I was like, oh yeah, I'm like maybe this personality type. And as we're reading, I'm like, I'm actually not. I'm actually I'm a little bit different in this personality matrix going by colors than I thought I was. And that's like interesting to explore, just in a sense of like, oh, I have different traits than I thought I had. And some of that is influenced by environment or by the interactions that you're having. So I like that It doesn't stop at just, well, this is me and this is my personality and this is what I do and how I behave. But it kind of goes further into like, this is how my personality works in the world, in the workplace, in a church situation, you have different personalities, and how you work together and communicate will be affected by that.
Yeah, and it's kind of where we were going the other day with it, is like that there is a conversation on nature versus nurture with it. Are you that personality type because you were made to be that way, or were you actually born that way? And obviously there's certain things we learn along the way that are good and positive, but there's also negative experiences we have that can stifle who we really are. And that's something to recognize too, and something we can heal from and submit to the Lord for healing too. So it's a invaluable thing, and I like how you said that. Like a lot of personality tests focus on yourself, but this book actually focuses on, yes, it does focus on you, but also the yous around you, the people around you, that and how to work with them. And I know in ministry it's invaluable because one of my dominant colors with it is the kind of the brute force and ignorance shade, and it's like I have no problem jumping into something and starting something from scratch, but I'm going to forget 8 really important details because I'm not that guy, right? And I need somebody else that's going to say, well, what about the plates? We're going to serve food. What about the plates? I didn't think about that, but everybody's going to have a great time, So, and it's where like teamwork really, really shines, and especially if you're able to work with the other people. And in that same thing, if you're planning a meal, there might be something that someone says, well, we should have ambient music, and we should just kind of welcome people at the door. And then somebody else says, that's great, but how much is this going to cost? Can we afford to do this in the first place? Why are we doing this in the first place? So like you have all those different personalities in there that can work beautifully together. But if unchecked, you can make it about only how many people show up, which isn't a good metric to measure by. You can make sure that people feel really happy when they walk in the door, but if there's no food, then that's kind of a lost leader, and because you're not really, or it's bait and switch because you're not really providing anything. You can have people that provide all the food, but they never send out invites, so nobody knows it's there, right? So this kind of is, I think, it's very important with ministry, and also so that you don't rush ahead of people, and most importantly, don't rush ahead of the Spirit. You know yourself well enough to stop and say, okay, cool the jets, figure this out, work with people, listen and learn. So yeah. What about you, Jerry? What was something that challenged you with this?
Um, One thing I always like is like every time it talks about like a certain color or something, Earl's like, I feel called out. So I feel like it's like a book of call outs, like on yourself, and then like we kind of talk about this often too, like you'll start like picturing people in your mind and like who this fits and that. So I think that's kind of funny, but I think it's a really good book, and like how we all kind of said it in a way like to adapt and to work with others and to just know what someone is, like their personality and what box they're in and how to work with that and how to adapt and just to like overall get the job done or just like mission accomplished in a way, but to not kind of cause problems either, like just to like work as a team and not just like a solo person trying to do it all by yourself and like
Yeah.
yeah, so I just kind of like it in that way. That's how it is to me.
Like you did a really good job of it wasn't trying to label everybody or say you are this, you are this, you are this, but recognizing that we can all have bits and pieces of every little thing. I know a lot of people shy away from like a personality test kind of thing, and this isn't that. Everybody's like, you can't label me, don't put me in a box, and it doesn't do that, and it recognizes that we are not in a box. We aren't. We can have similar traits along the way, and I think what it does is it really helps recognizes like you're a little bit of this, a little bit of that, some of this. Like we are a bit of a smorgasbord really as individuals, and that's what I liked about this approach and the approach that this guy takes in this book, whatever his name was, and he takes that really good approach of recognizing that this is you can't just slap a label on somebody and expect them to behave that way all the time, but recognizing different traits and understanding how all of those things can kind of come together, and maybe we'll invent a new color out of all this scheme. But but I thought that was really neat because you don't feel like you're stuck into a box and made to feel like, oh, I'm this, and so I must behave this way. No, it doesn't do that at all. But it just kind of helps recognize different traits and understanding how those traits interact with other traits. And I think that was really helpful.
Because like he doesn't, yeah, like he doesn't. He says quite clearly that there's nobody that's one dominant, right? Like I mean, you'll have things that you're part of. The one may have a dominant color because like it's like what red, yellow, green, and blue, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of the disc survey thing if you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you may be a dominant red, but it doesn't mean you're all red. Like that person would be brutal over this, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you might have, some yellow, you might even have some green, like you may have two or three in there. How much it's weighted, I think it is a nature versus nurture thing personally. But yeah, very interesting idea.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something? Anything? Any last comment there?
Oh, I was kind of laughing about what Jerry said about being called out because I've had some spots in the book where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't want this to be me, but it is.
Yeah.
And it's the way he says it is so humorous. So it's like, if you're reading the book, you kind of have to be one of two types of people. You either have to be able to laugh at yourself because you recognize that you're getting called out, or you have to be a person who lacks self-awareness so much that you don't realize you're being called out. Like you kind of have to be one of the two. Like you have to be able to laugh at yourself or be so unaware that you're being called out that you're not laughing. But either way, it's a really good read. And I like that it's humorous. It's not just like, again, personality tests can be pretty like,
it's not clinical.
Cut and dry. Whereas this one, it's like, sometimes you have to laugh at yourself because it's like, yeah, I do this thing and it's,
And when he's given examples of various personality types, he's using Star Wars characters, which is awesome.
I like that.
So but he is accepting the fact that this is he does write a little tongue in cheek, and he gives some humorous examples of different things that are true and real, but he, like you said, he twists it into a kind of a humorous story sometimes. He did a good job of that.
Yeah. So keeping in mind with the two books that we looked at, two very different books. What's the internship been like for you guys through those lenses? And I'm asking in a very broad sense, so I'm not really leading to anything, but I do notice that that's like one of the things we talked about multiple times was in the brochure of ministry, which there isn't one, but if someone was to give you a brochure on ministry, you'd probably see a pulpit or thousands coming to Jesus at the platform, things like that. You're not going to see scrubbing toilets very often. And yet, an internship has had a bit of mixture of all that. So, what do you think? What has it been for you? What has challenged you? Given the books that we've read, the challenges of the inner and the outer disciplines, working with each other, working with others, and the reality of what ministry is, how's that been settling with you?
There's a lot of different things I think have been good with this, because one, it has helped. Just being involved in this little program has really helped all of us, I think, kind of see the underbelly, I guess you would call it, of ministry. Like it's not all glamour and flashy lights or instruments and playing music and delivering these profound speeches. It is a lot of hands-on work that a lot of people don't see, which is good. But I think one of the best things that I've enjoyed about this is this right here. With these books that we've gone through, we sit and we talk about them, and we can read a great book and you can tell somebody, oh, you should read this book, it's really good. But the book is further enhanced by these kinds of conversations, and that's what I always look forward to is our meetings where we'd come together and we would go over it and we would discuss just like what we're doing right now in sort of a roundtable discussion. And it's not, one person just teaching you this is what this says, now learn it and go do it. It's all of us coming together and discussing things. And I think that is just extremely valuable in any sort of setting, especially if we're talking about books and we're saying, hey, what did you get out of this book? And I think if we were to recommend that book to somebody, I think it's a responsibility that we journey through it with them, and allow them to ask questions about it and say, hey, what did you think about that part? Or what did you think about this part? And I think that like, if you don't do that, you're missing something. If you're not able to take something and gain something from it and then not share it with somebody else or allow somebody to be like, no, you totally missed the point on that one, then you're missing a huge thing of what the author might have intended.
Yeah, the roundtable discussions, so to speak.
I think it's extremely valuable, whether you do it in a podcast and record it, or you just have a thing where you meet with some friends. I think the concept of a coffee table, we just go sit and meet and what did they call them back in the old days? Like a salon where they would all get together for dinner.
Yeah.
And they would just throw some topics out there and they would all sit and discuss, the ancient Roman Empire was neither ancient nor Roman. Discuss, I mean, so those kinds of things. But I think that idea, and it goes back to the celebration of discipline of community, and getting these ideas from everybody else. And I love our men's groups at night, and I know the women's groups do all their kind of things, and the high school kids do their things too. And I think those things are so vitally important for a church to grow and for an individual to grow. They need those kinds of things. We are designed to do this together. And that's what I've loved about these books, is that it's given us this opportunity to discuss these ideas almost as just like a platform for us to approach it and be like, okay, let's talk about this rather than just a disorganized sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things that I've observed with this too is leaning on that community aspect is that the projects that we've done together, you can look at it on the outside. And when I say project, I mean like clearing out a storage locker that's been around for about 18 years and nobody really knew what was in it.
I don't know what storage shed you're talking about.
Yeah.
There is no storage.
We don't talk about that. But or whether it's cleaning up stuff or clearing out stuff, and it's like it's one of those quiet, invisible things you do for the Lord and you do for His church that will bless the church, even if nobody sees it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the lion's share of ministry, is doing quiet, invisible things that nobody sees that bless the Lord and His church. And so there was a lot of that this summer. A lot of the stuff that we did as a group or as you did as individuals were towards those goals. And you're not going to see the reward. Nobody's going to pat you on the back on a Sunday, but the Lord knows what you're doing. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and it absolutely blesses the church. I mean, the place is better for it, and obviously every internship is going to have its own different flavor. It's like when you do youth ministry, every year is different because it's just different makeup of kids, different dynamics, different places, things, right? And it's though every summer internship will be different. This internship, I think, was focused, if I was to look back on it, it was focused on servanthood and servant leadership and doing the invisible things that nobody sees. But I know that the four of us will now walk around the church and we'll be able to see all that we've been involved with, and we'll see people interacting with that, like the back of the church, things like that, in new ways. And we can just say, well, thank you, Lord, that I got to be a part of that, because look how much joy they're having as a result, right? So it's those quiet, thankless things you don't see in the brochure. There weren't any public sermons, we did do some Bible studies. Aaron, you let the men study a few times now, and different things like that. But what I loved about it was that the sermons that you did, the studies that you did for each of us, that we did for as a group, just for this group, you brought it all to it. That's the one thing I noticed about the three of you, is that it's like there was nobody who was just like, oh, well, what the heck? It's just for this internship. Who cares? You studied like you were doing it on a Sunday morning, and I loved that. And that, again, just kind of shows that there's a heart there behind this. And you don't see the stuff in the ministry brochure for some of the things we did. I mean, Jerry, you went out on a pantry call, right? Food pantry call with Dylan, and this guy's thrown up on him and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, nobody at church knew about that. Okay. But you're in the thick of it right there. That's ministry, and that's a part of being a pastor. I was cleaning toilets the other day, that kind of thing. It's like, nobody knows that. And I'm saying that out loud now, and just to say that, yeah, like this is ministry. It's not all pulpit work. It's not all the, publishing and the fancy stuff. It is doing whatever needs to be done for the body of Christ in invisible and silent, thankless ways. And that's what the internship is about this summer for sure. So how did that interact with you? How did you guys come to that and through that?
I think one of the interesting things for me was and I've been doing stuff for years, but not at this kind of like time intensity, if that makes sense, like this summer. And so one of the things that happened this summer was like, it sounds kind of cliche, but to say like ministry is like expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
Like you're going to walk into the day, you're going to have a to-do list, you're going to have a plan. You're not going to get anything done. Nothing from that to-do list is getting done. You got about 17 other things done, and they were all really valuable and really important. But the actual list you started the day with, that didn't happen. And it reminds me of one of the lines that I've heard you say for years, which is "Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape." The first time I heard you say that was probably 5 years ago, and it was when something was going wrong, and I probably gave you a look that was like, "Really? Like, could you not? Like,
Yeah.
this isn't funny."
I think that's a
And
Chuck Smith.
I laugh about it now because I think, yeah, the first time I heard you say it, I was like, oh, but now it's like, let's start the flexible for we shall not be bent out of shape. Like, we're just going to go with it. And like, I did have something like come through the door in the first part of the summer. And for about half the summer, it was like, that one thing was a lot of what I was doing. And it was like, it was good. And it was, able to like invest in somebody and pour into their life. But it was not on my it's like the line everyone says, this was not on my bingo card. And it was one of those things, but it ended up being something that was really good. So it's just, you got to be flexible and expect the unexpected.
I would have to say, I guess coming into this in a way, I thought it was all just gonna be like preaching stuff and like like talking
There we
and
go.
learning how to talk in front of the people.
Yeah.
But like how Earl said, it's about serving and like even how the spiritual discipline serving, like we did a lot of that within like moving and doing, like he said, also like doing things people don't see. And even like how the change of the church, like you can see it really happening, like people that wouldn't normally read or do communion or like speak out, they're up there every Sunday now, like a new change, a new rotation of people like doing it. And even like the people noticing, like you can tell like people are noticing also, like they'll be like, whoa, like look at the church, look at what y'all have done, which is not for us to get praise or anything, but like I think it's just really, really interesting and cool. Like we're serving the church and people are noticing, and then that could honestly kind of change their heart in a way to like, sir, what can I do for the church? But out of this whole internship, I'd say my favorite part was honestly like learning how to lead Bible studies. I don't remember that guy's name honestly, but
Dan Finbrook.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
he was good. Like I think doing that, like even taking that home and starting a family Bible study really changed like how I'm speaking and kind of making me less nervous to speak in front of a crowd. Like it really helped me grow in a lot of ways. And even this internship, like speaking out sometimes, like sometimes I just mainly just listen and take in what people like y'all are saying because I'm still kind of learning a lot myself. But like that Bible study thing had to be my favorite thing because it really changed me in a way to like be a better vocal person, be a more challenging person for Christ in a way too, and also just like remember like I'm still learning as well. Like I'm not a know-it-all. But yeah.
Yeah, that is an awesome system. It's the inductive Bible study method. Dan Finfrock. I can't remember the name of the ministry that he's a part of, but there's a lot of people that do it now. And Calvary Chapel's been a part of that. He is part of Calvary Chapel, and so I learned it through that myself. And it's how I do sermons. It's how I do Bible studies now. Like the thing is that I remember going through it and thinking, this is painfully practical. Why didn't I think of this before?
Mm-hmm.
Right? but that's the whole thing. It is very practical, and it dissects it in the right way. And I think the beauty of it is that by the time you finished, yeah, you do feel that sense of, okay, I can lead through this because it's, you're already being led through it yourself. And that's the beauty of it is being, you'll be face rolled through the content before you bring it to anybody else. I think that's really cool. Yeah. And you're right. It does kind of bring that confidence. So it's a great method to use, and I think it's a good one to learn for sure.
I think another thing I forgot to say also was like I loved how he said feeding people the green grass and not the brown grass. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of what, like, even what you see like pastors do nowadays. Like, it's more of their own input and their own, like, their way or the highway. But,
Mm-hmm.
like, are you really teaching the word? But are you really teaching about more of yourself? And I love that because it made me think, because it reminded me, like, reflect on my first sermon where I felt like I just was blabbing and not really knowing what I was talking about. But kind of like made me open my eyes in a broader aspect to like, well, you need to get to like study this and feed the green grass and not the brown grass. And that's something I really found interesting.
But you did great though. And that first sermon you did. Oh, seriously, that first sermon you did. This is actually really interesting. Like the first one you did before the internship, okay, at church, it was really good, okay. But this last one that you just did after having a couple of months of studying this and going through stuff and everything like that, it was really good, and so you could tell that you'd learned a lot. And so it wasn't just kind of passing on a bit of information. It was now actually you were teaching concepts and passing on through discipleship. That's what it felt like. So you did great. So this whole like, yeah, I didn't know what I was talking about. It's like I don't agree with that at all. Like,
You can definitely feel that way sometimes, but no, yeah, it's great. And I'm with you on that. I think that was probably one of my favorite episodes of this summer too. Was going through that inductive Bible study. Call it hermeneutics, call it whatever you want, but um, I think everybody should have some sort of experience with that form of study. Just if whether you plan on leading a Bible study or preaching or whatever, it doesn't matter. Do it in your personal life because it's a way of just opening up the scripture and the way of making you look at things in a way that you wouldn't normally have looked at them. And, the prime example I always give is when I was in school in a hermeneutics class, and one of the first assignments they gave us was just this short passage out of the book of Acts chapter 1. And he said, I want you to go home tonight for homework. And we had to write down 30 different things that we observed about these two little verses. What kind of things are happening in there? What words are used? And you're thinking of all these weird things. It's like, I noticed that there were 7 periods in this sentence, whatever, or not in a sentence, but paragraph or whatever. But there probably wouldn't be more than 1 period in a sentence. Ellipses. But anyways, but then we turned in those papers being all proud, and then he said, okay, now take the same verses and give me 30 more tomorrow. And so you're like, oh my gosh, what am I looking at now? But you're going into like that deep dive, and this is a way of looking at the Bible and building the outlines and saying this interacts with this. So this thought, this idea is now interacting with this thought and idea, which now these are interacting with this thought and idea. And it's a way of looking at all of these things and how they all come together. And then you start to see not just a verse, but you see a chapter, and then you don't see a chapter, you see the whole book. But then you don't see the whole book, you see the Bible is one big story, and it's all telling the same story. When you realize that this is just one tiny little bit of a larger narrative, and you're like, oh, and then you start to learn how to plug everything in. And like I said, it doesn't matter if you're going into ministry or if you're leading a small group or whatever, just in your own personal life, this is a great way of learning to study the Bible and learning how to read through it and not just look at it as, oh, this is just a boring thing, but there's just so much more in there than anybody has ever even thought of. And I think everybody should definitely find a way to learn about the system.
Yeah. Well, and I had said, Earl, I think I had said to you, because I decided to go through one of my favorite passages, which is Daniel 3. So Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, fiery furnace, that whole story. And it's one of those stories where it's like, I've heard that story since I was like yay high. I've heard that story my whole life. And it's one of my favorites. And I was going through it and I was like, I thought I was studying my Bible, but now I feel like I've never actually studied the Bible, because you're going through this inductive Bible study and it's so simple in like the formula and in the instructions of how to go through it, but it has a way of just like making you see things that you've never seen before. And, and seeing things in a different way. And there was something I remember saying, and you were like, I've never thought of it that way before. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, everybody's probably thought this before. I'm just going to say something. You were like, no, I've never heard that before. And I was like, it makes you see the Bible in a different way. especially because it's like, you know, a lot of the Bible, when we have those narrative texts, it's history. So it's like, this happened, this happened, this happened. Here's the main points. And one of those things that I found the most interesting in the inductive Bible study method, when he's talking about how to go through those texts, when you're thinking about the characters and like list out who are the main characters. Okay, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, King Nebuchadnezzar, the guys who ratted them out. Like these are our main characters, but like put yourself in their shoes, and what would it be like to be standing there, and how would you feel if you were like in that interaction? If you were one of the disciples in the boat during the storm, what would that have been like, and how much context that provides to the situation? Because it's like Jesus came to them walking on the water, or he, you know, and this happened and he calmed the storm. It's like, yeah, that's great, but what would it have been like to actually be there, and what kind of context does that bring to the situation and to what was said? So I thought that was one of the most interesting things about it.
So if you were to tell anybody about the internship for next summer, what would it be?
Prepare to be unprepared.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Yeah, prepare to be unprepared. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and you know, Addie, what you brought up earlier, it's like we had the list of things to do today. We never once, I don't think, ever actually got through the list.
I think I can count it on one hand.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, okay, well, we tried, you know, but it's not that we didn't do anything or things didn't get accomplished, but it's like we were working on something, but then something else came up and this was important. And so we're just like, okay, let's go do that. And you're like, oh, well, I thought I was just going to do like churchy Bible study stuff. No, not always.
Yeah.
Now I'm playing soccer with a bunch of first graders. Okay, that's not what I thought I was going to be doing, but I did, you know, and I sprained my ankle. So, but, you know, that wasn't on the list of things to do this summer, you know, but it's, you know, if you're looking at doing this internship or anything in particular like that, or any type of being involved with a church ministry program in whatever capacity, just you're not going to be prepared for everything. You can do and practice all you want to, and you know, it's something else is going to happen. You know, and I've learned that in my life as, you know, as a Christian and just in business and all kinds of things. There's just always things that get thrown at you, and this is a good way to approach every situation. It's just, like you said, blessed are the flexible. You know, I mean, because you're going to need to bend, you know, and just be ready for that. So I think, you know, that's the only way you can prepare, is just to be ready to change. You know,
and that challenges the ego.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah.
It really does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially because, I mean, you would work and come up with this is what we're going to do today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all kind of like, yeah, right. And we just throw the paper in the trash and be like, okay, now what are we really going to do today?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I know that you spend time working on, you know, coming up with a game plan, which was good because at least we had a place to start, but we never finished there.
Mm-hmm.
The finish line was always somewhere else.
Yeah. And that's normal, you know, in the sense that it's, if you are a servant to all,
Mm-hmm.
okay, then someone comes in the door and you help them. I had an experience when I was when we were raising the kids. My youngest son comes to me with a couple of Lego blocks that he couldn't get apart. Right now, I'm sitting at my desk. I'm looking at a bill that I know we can't pay, and I'm stressing. Okay. And these Lego blocks were the smallest thing in the world to me, in the sense of the grand scheme of things. But to him, it was the biggest deal. He was like near tears, you know, because he was just a little guy. And so I stopped, you know, pulled them apart. You know, they were pretty tough to get apart. Don't blame him, but I mean, I got them apart and gave them to him. He walked off happy. I sat back. The bill was still there, right? But that kind of taught me about fatherhood, right? That it's you really, like, those people around you that you serve. What they're going through is important, whether you think it's important or not. And so if something walks in the door and it's kind of a minor on your bingo card, so to speak, or not even on there, but it's a major to them, well, you love them by dropping what you're doing and you take care of what's going on. And that's an example of something that happened with the internship. I would come up with these lists and plans, and we would probably get through about a quarter or half, maybe on a good day we'd get half the list done.
Yeah.
right? But there was always something that came up that needed our attention. Always something that came up that needed to be addressed or to be prepared for something or a memorial or something like that you can't predict or plan for. Things like that. And yeah, absolutely. So flexibility is huge for sure to just come into it. I think if you came into it thinking that you were going to learn how to be, a Greg Laurie or something like that, probably going to be pretty disappointed. Nothing against the man. It's just more that it's not about that, right? It isn't. Ministry isn't about that. Certainly if you do any missions work, you recognize it's a lot of making rice, right? It's a lot of preparing. It's a lot of helping. It's a lot of looking after things, digging ditches and stuff. And those moments of sharing the gospel are there, 100%. But it's also a lot of hard work outside of that. So, but what about you guys?
I would have to say like Ozark kind of teaches you about ministry and like what it kind of would look like in an aspect.
Mhm.
But for me personally, like I'm more of like a hands-on learner. So like to put that in words, I'd say it was interesting for sure. And to like actually do it was actually like more eye-opening in a way because it's like we weren't just doing full ministry stuff. Like we were serving the church, we were serving people, we were doing VBS and even like CIY. Like those were all like experiences, like not really like what they teach you for. They just teach you about the Bible and like how you're gonna go out into the world and do that stuff. But like to actually do it was like more better to me because like it's like, whoa, this is what you're really getting yourself into. And even like when we talked about like the food pantry thing with Dylan, like wow, that was crazy. Like honestly, I kind of forgot about it like until I think Earl mentioned it like the last food pantry because like I don't think like it was something I wanted to remember.
Sure.
But I mean like how you said welcome to ministry, like that stuff you kind of have to do like to serve people, which is loving people how Christ did. And then honestly that was like really humility, like real humble for me, like humbled me in a lot of ways. Like this is what you're gonna get yourself into. Like, are you ready for it or not? And like that's a question I kind of asked myself, and I think this internship was a lot of like those questions, like, am I really ready for this? And like a lot of questions I'd ask myself and answer for myself. And I think if someone were to go through this and like we're about to do an internship, probably not like the one we have, but like it's just gonna be a lot of like asking yourself those questions, like, are you really ready for this?
I think it's one of those experiences too where it's like you get out of it what you put into it. So it's like, if someone's thinking about doing it, like, yes, do it. Absolutely. And just be ready to jump in completely,
Mm,
if you're going to do it fully and really be there. Because yeah, you'll get out of it what you put into it. But if you just kind of show up and you're only kind of there and you're only
Mhm.
kind of participating and you're only kind of there but not fully, it's like you'll only get that kind of there experience. But you
mhm.
know, it's like a lot of things in life. If you're going to be there fully, you know. Like I think that's an important lesson I think in life, and it was kind of like a crash course in that this summer. But just show up and do the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that was Jamie's CIY's like slogan thing was be there. And like to me at first it kind of passed over my head, but like when he explained it more, like if you have a job, you're gonna be there. If you have responsibilities, you gotta be there. If you're gonna be a father or mother or anything, you gotta be there. Like it's about showing up and being there and like putting your whole effort into whatever you're gonna be there for. And when he explained that, I was like, dang, that has like a deeper meaning. I was like, that's really cool. So I like how you said that, Addy, like be there. Like, yeah, that's good.
That's a great slogan. I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the Nike slogan. Do it. Just do it.
There you go. Okay, well, thank you guys. Thank you for taking your time to do this, and this will be the one of many, many that we do, and so we'll meet up next week again, and I think next week we're going to talk about Adalia's book, Appointed to Hope. So he's going to have to talk a bit more, but I know I have some questions, and it is a great read, really good read. So we're going to do that, and then yeah, Dylan is a guy I'd like to have on this.
Absolutely.
My friend Aaron Salvato out in Yukon, Oklahoma. I'd love to have him on this too. So we'll have a whole bunch of people that come on. So and again, this is about all of us. So anything you have a passion for, we're going to bring that up too. And in the meantime, let's go off and continue to do the work the Lord has for us. And I think quoting Jamie is the perfect end of this. Let's just be there. So, okay.
Right.
All right. I love you guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.